Hey everyone, how's it going? Aaron Rift here from NoDQ.com. Welcome to the very first panel video here on NoDQ, the first NoDQ panel. I have several guests here today, the usual NoDQ panel members. Good old JM Jeff Meacham, the self-proclaimed greatest columnist in NoDQ history, Virtue. And also today our special fourth guest, Craig. How's it going, man?
I'm doing fantastic, Aaron. Look, I really appreciate you guys having me on, and I'm really pumped for this video.
I'm really happy to have you on. Thank you for being dedicated. I understand it's not even 6 a.m. over there in Australia.
No, mate, but I do night shifts, so I'm usually up at around about this time.
Well,
The Aaron
yeah,
Rich of Australia, a freaking wrestling guy up at 6 o'clock in the morning. No thanks. That's all you guys.
yeah, that is something Jeff Meacham would never do. But thank you very much for your dedication. I appreciate you being on. So today, our topic of discussion is the most overrated wrestlers in wrestling history. I have a list of names here. I will go ahead and list off some of the names. We'll discuss some of the names. Maybe you guys can throw in some names. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. The first name I want to mention, I did a poll on NoDQ.com, by the way, regarding the most overrated wrestler several months ago. And the number one result for the most overrated wrestler, Jeff, who do you think it is, if you had to take a guess?
It's got to be the guy that won this in '97, Lex Luger.
It is not Lex Luger, but he is on my list. We'll get to him in a few minutes.
Okay.
The number one guy is somebody that you really like, Jeff. His name is Hulk Hogan. What is your
Well,
reaction to
you
this?
know, I absolutely agree with that, believe it or not, because Hulk was definitely all hype, no sizzle. He was the guy who would come out there and, pose for 10 minutes, wrestle for less than 10, and then he would pose for another half hour after that. So it's like, as opposed to the guys that carried this belt who would go in there and wrestle an hour every night, you know, 7 days a week, twice on Sunday, you know, I will forever be indebted to Hulk Hogan for drawing me into being a wrestling fan, but he is definitely up there with one of the guys you just go, okay, you say so. As opposed to Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, Sting, Harley, those guys. Hulk Hogan was very much the embodiment of the gimmick-heavy WWF 1980s.
I agree on that. I think that if I had to assess it, I would say Hulk Hogan was definitely not overrated during his peak. He was the biggest draw in wrestling. He had charisma like nobody else. Now, in WCW, towards the end, I would say his value definitely diminished, and he was getting paid way more than what he was worth at the end of WCW. But that was Hogan playing the political game and all that. Jeff?
Well, Virtue, let me ask you something, because you've been a fan for a long time as well. Hulk held this belt twice between 95 and 97 for a grand total of almost 1,000 days. It's like, that's ridiculous when he was doing way less in the 90s as far as his in-ring skill than he ever did in the 80s. And for him to be a world champion that long because he was Hulk Hogan was, like I said earlier, more hype, less sizzle.
Well, here you got to remember with Hogan, especially in WCW, it was all about promos, like getting in the ring, standing with the NWO, holding the belt. They could care less about matches. So when Halloween Havoc or whatever the big pay-per-views were, they would have the match, and if it was a 7 or 8 minute match, they didn't care because they already had the people's money. So when I think of Hogan, definitely overrated wrestler. I mean, the guy worked under 10-minute matches. As a sports entertainer, he was one of, if not the best. Now, we're calling him overrated, but yet we'll say him and The Rock, and we'll talk about this another time, are in one of the greatest matches of all time. That's crazy. But the thing is with Hogan, he pulled me in because I like to see the bad guys beat him up going into a match. So the payoff, I hated the payoff because it was always Hogan beating him. Now, that's where it was overrated. But like the whole buildup of the Hogan feuds, that's why I'm a big fan of villains in wrestling, because there were stories told. That's when Hogan delivered the sports entertaining aspect of it. As a wrestler, though, and we'll talk about this at some point, he's probably in most of the worst matches of all time. I mean, it's just, and that's the thing. He was trained, but back then it was different. He could get away with doing 2 or 3 moves and the whole gimmick of hulking up. So that's not wrestling. That is sports entertainment. So I am going to. It looks like I'm going to pass it over to Australia. And the reason why I'm calling you that, I really, really want to go to Australia one day. So I'm going to pass it down to 17 hours away right now because I'm very interested in what you have to say about this man.
Thank you very much, Virtue. Look, man, he's the original creator of the 5 moves of doom.
That's true.
So basically, John Cena must have took a note out of his book because he's right up there as well. But look, Hulk Hogan, he's an icon in the sport. He'll always forever be etched in the sports entertainment value, no matter who or where or wrestling fans, non-wrestling fans, everybody knows who Hulk Hogan is. And you know what? You're right. He's number 1 in the most overrated wrestlers in the world or even in history. And, I'd have to say that you're right. The end of his run of the WCW, he was fizzling out. I really don't think if he was in his prime right now, he'd be able to survive in the WWE right now because the talent is so thick and WWE don't know what to do with the best talent that they've got. I mean, look at Austin Aries being released. That is just absolutely insane.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely changed. The landscape has changed where now it's more about the wrestling than it has ever been in history, really. You look back at the Hulk Hogan era, it was more about the personalities and it was less about the wrestling. So it really has changed. But I think all of you made really good points about Hulk Hogan. Now, Craig, I'd like to ask you, who's at the top of your list besides Hogan? Who would you say is the most overrated wrestler and why?
Look at the Great Khali, buddy.
I got him on this list. He's actually number 3 on the NoDQ poll.
Yeah, he's like a big overgrown gimp, that guy.
Jeff, what do you think about the Great Khali?
Great Khali is a great example of the guy having the ultimate look for the business, much like a guy like Giant Gonzalez or some other guys that have been big, bad-looking dudes and just did not deliver. Great Khali literally stood there in the middle of the ring and let guys run into him and knock them over by himself and chop them down like a tree. Like it was mind-boggling that he was world champion even, and the fact that he's everything they wanted. What they wanted him to be is everything that Jinder Mahal is now. The big India hero, the guy who's carrying the championship as an Indian icon, and Khali just did not have the goods to deliver that kind of momentum. Would you agree, Craig?
Khali couldn't even talk on the microphone. It's like, that's like you could not understand a word the guy that what he was saying. Like, and his finishing move was not even credible. To get someone in the head like that, like I wouldn't even bump off that. So
well, I think he did the Vice script. Oh, by the way, guys, Craig does have some indie wrestling experience, so
12 years,
Yeah,
wow.
That's pretty impressive there. So, I just got a message there. All right. So, Virtue, anything you want to add about Great Khali?
It's the epitome of the Andre the Giant syndrome. Vince McMahon always loved the larger-than-life guys, even if they're not talented in the ring. So that's what got Khali his spot. He's probably a worse wrestler than Hulk Hogan. I mean, if we really had to break it down. But the fact is, he was 7'7", 7'1". I'm not sure. He walked out there, and Vince will always play to the kids' reaction on guys like that. Like when he walks through the curtain and the kids drop their jaws, and the ones that are sitting close look up at him. That's kind of how sports entertainment was built. Vince that he wanted to make casual people enjoy it, so they didn't really care about the wrestling. So to make him the champion, it was because there was 2 brands at the time, 2 belts. If it was back in the day, I don't think he would have ever got it because Giant Gonzalez never got it.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, that would have been.
I just gotta say, it wasn't just kids' reactions. I was at floor level at Staples Center at a Raw. I think it was the Raw where like everybody was trying to join DX that one night, and Khali walked out. I swear he dwarfed the ramp. Even he was. You look up, it's like. Yeah. Oh my God! But like we all said, once he gets into the ring, it's like, oh, he sucks.
It's like we're supposed to forget. It's like we're supposed to forget they're clumsy and bad in the ring just because we're in shock of how they look. I
Yeah,
mean, that's really,
that's a great point.
you know,
Because when I go to the shows, like the people around me would react to Khali like, "Holy crap, this guy is huge." I mean, he definitely. I think Jim Ross said it best. He was an attraction in WWE, but I agree he should not have been the world champion. I think that was going a little bit too far, just a little bit. Now, going back to Craig and what he was talking about earlier, Craig, you mentioned John Cena, so let's bring him up. He came in number 4 on the list. So, Jeff, I want to get your thoughts first on John Cena. Overrated or not overrated?
I don't know about I think overrated is a very strong word when it comes to John Cena. I think overhyped is definitely the right category for John Cena. The fact that, you know, he is capable of having more than 5 moves of doom, but WWE doesn't allow him to show. And when they do showcase it, people completely lose their damn minds. You know, the whole springboard center, people are like, he can do what? They were flabbergasted.
6 minutes.
John has a very capable move set. The problem is, once they turned the Dr. Thugonomics babyface, it was the beginning of the end, because then he was, you know, into that Hulk Hogan and The Rock and all that, you know, that role where, you know, you have to be protected, you have to be the top babyface, the top star, and he couldn't do anything besides, you know, the 5-knuckle shuffle and the FU and the STFU and all that, whatever they're called now. But I think overrated is too strong, but overhyped is definitely the right word. What do you think, Virtue?
he's number 1 on my list, and I'll tell you why. Obviously, that was Vince McMahon's answer to I want a new generation Hulk Hogan. You know, after Hulk and the little bit that Warrior was up there, they went into a pattern of having a lot of different guys at the top. Bret Hart, they would have heels, Yokozuna, Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Diesel, and Austin and The Rock, and even Mick Foley and Triple H. But it's like Vince, for whatever reason, I don't know why he felt he needed to go to one guy as the face of the company in mid-2000s, and that's exactly what they did in John Cena. Here's the problem with Cena. As much as I hate on him, it's the fact that he tried to do too much. I think he took to heart because of the internet boom, people making fun of his wrestling style. When the guy bumps, Craig, you can maybe see it, maybe I'm crazy on this, he protects himself too much on bumps. Now, I get that. He's the main guy. I see too many arms, awkward falls, and I notice that. So it's like it's not believable. It's like when he gets power bombed, it's like he's gently let down. And I think he could go a little bit harder. Again, it might be because he's told to protect his body. He's still gotten hurt, but something about it, he's tried to extend his moveset with the springboard stunner, this and that, and it looks clumsy because I think it's out of his comfort zone. If he stuck to like what Austin did after the neck injury, Austin did nothing, but you know what? You watched those matches of his and you didn't care. That's what I think Cena should have done instead of trying to overextend his moveset to please the fans. So to me, he put too much effort into trying to be a great wrestler, and I saw it. It was obvious, and maybe I'm not a common fan. I look at it a little bit closer. So what do you think, Greg?
Look,
is it Craig? Sorry, it's Craig.
Yes, Craig.
It's
sorry.
Craig.
Yeah, I do that with. I call Greg's Craig's, and I call Greg opposite.
Yeah, we have Greg Cherry on the channel, so that's why you got confused. But it's okay.
It's all good. It's all right. People mess up my name sometimes, but you guys sound different when you say it. But nonetheless, John Cena. Look, I respect the guy. I respect the hell out of him for what he's done in this generation of the business. But as a wrestling standpoint, you're right. He's definitely 100% overrated. The hype is up there, and it's always up there with John Cena, only because the machine of WWE is pushing him to the moon and back, and they will continue to do that. And, if they're going to continue to make money off him, that's what they're going to do. John Cena's matches, there's some that are pretty good, some that aren't. But nonetheless, Cena's Cena, and that's what you're going to get.
Yeah, I agree.
He's had the luxury of working with great workers.
Yeah,
they're always going to make John Cena look. When somebody will tell me John Cena looks awesome, look at all. Do they ever say it's the other guy making Cena look great?
Look who he's working with.
AJ.
That's the bottom line. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think Cena's not a great wrestler, but I think he's very good. And I think he puts in the work just about more than anybody. I mean, the guy really works his ass off, and I think that that's what a lot of people respect about him. He's not one of the best wrestlers of all time, but as far as his promos go and his talking, I mean, he's one of the best, I would say, in that category. I would say he's not overrated when it comes to getting on the mic and selling people on a match. I think he's definitely one of the best, one of the most passionate guys in WWE history, in wrestling history, period. Now, a guy similar to John Cena is Roman Reigns. Virtue, I know you have a lot to say about Roman Reigns, so the floor is yours. Your thoughts on Roman Reigns, overrated or not?
No, he's not. I mean, I'm going to get, criticized for this, but, he overpushed, because he's Vince's guy. But Roman Reigns has done a lot of jobs, more than I think Cena up to this point in Cena's career. But the thing is with Roman, when I watch him, it's the cliche, the Thor, the Superman punch and the spear. But he, like I said, and I'm a broken record, the guy bumps phenomenally. He puts his body on the line. He smashes into the ambulance. He hits his hands on the mat hard on bumps. And with that said, if you are a great worker like that, to sell to your opponents, he made Strowman look even better than Strowman looked on his own. I cannot call Reigns overrated because of that. Now, I'm going to pass it to Craig first because he's worked matches. Am I crazy when I say that?
No, definitely not. Look, his in-ring ability with bumping and selling and putting over talent it's there. But again, with the machine of WWE behind him and pushing him to the moon and force-feeding it down to our throats, the fans are going to reject him. And that's what's happening at the moment. As Reigns, I believe if you took his character in a different direction, as Aaron said, if you took his character in a different direction, maybe turned him heel, well, then maybe have a heel run and then bring him back as a face, you'll probably get more positivity from the fans. But after beating The Undertaker at WrestleMania, that's going to be hard to come back from, eh?
Jeff?
Yeah, I think the difference between Roman and John Cena as far as their in-ring skills and whatnot is ties back to their training. Yeah, remember, John Cena came up through UPW, which I'm not sliding Rick Bassman at all, but the Ultimate Warrior. Okay. Yeah. So, whereas Roman was trained by his family, the Samoans, and came up in FCW, which Hunter is all NXT.
Did you read my last column? Did you read my last column on Ray?
I did.
But go ahead, Jeff. That's a great point.
So yeah, just the fact that Roman's in-ring skill set has been shaped and molded by the Wild Samoans and by Triple H and NXT, and that whole different mindset than when John Cena came in 17 years ago, if you can believe that. It's a whole other world for Roman Reigns. He is not overrated. He's definitely overhyped, but the problem is he backs up the hype. Like what you said, he bumps like a dream. It's ridiculous. The way this guy flies around the ring, getting his ass handed to him on a nightly. The guy is so credible and gets so much crap. It makes me sick.
Yeah. I think people slay him for promo work. If he could somehow just improve that a little bit, or they could give him the right things to say, I think a lot of people would accept him. I mean, again, I can hear the trolls now messaging me, but I really think, look at the night after he beat Taker on Raw. All he said was, "This is my yard now." But the way they orchestrated his delivery on that, sure, the arena filled up with boos. My buddy was there. He could not believe how loud it was. But the fact is, Craig said, that whole heel thing, they could use for Reigns for 6 months or a year to turn him back babyface. I think he would get a lot of people's respect.
Yeah, just like Rocky Maivia when he turned heel.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. If they would just harness Cena's promo ability and Reigns' ability to bump and sell and everything, we'd have a super wrestler.
We would have like the next Austin or Rock possibly.
We would. We totally would.
Yeah, you guys made some great points there about Roman Reigns. Definitely think if he had Cena's promo abilities, he could be like that guy for real. Because John Cena is so good on the mic that he can get fans booing him to actually, by the end of the promo, I've seen it before several times where his promo is so good, the fans start cheering him at the end and they actually chant Cena.
Think about it. 4th of July, even before Rusev came out, they were booing him on the 4th of July with American flag colors on. He walked out there. He was getting booed incessantly. But he was working, and he kept the promo. And then all of a sudden, people slowly turned. Even before Rusev walked out and interrupted him with his Bulgarian flag, people were on John's side already.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Jeff, I want to ask you, in your opinion, who's the most overrated? Somebody who we've not mentioned yet. Who's at the top of your list?
Well, I mentioned Lex, but I have to point out something because I was getting chirped in my ear because I was talking to somebody about this earlier. Lex is not overrated. We saw early on that Lex was going to suck. I mean, the fact that they put him with the Horsemen, and when they turned him babyface, I mean, there's a promo on the Horseman DVD where he was not out of the Horseman yet. He was cutting the promo prior to Bunkhouse Stampede. And JJ was standing there giving him a look like, are you going to turn on us? But the same thing, he almost the look was like, God, you suck. Like, your promo is just awful. And so his promos were never all that solid. Even as the babyface that beat Hogan for this in '97, he was never that big that big promo guy. And yeah, his in-ring work, it was not the most pleasant thing to watch. But overrated is the wrong term because people saw 30 years ago he was not going to be the next Hulk Hogan, the next Ric Flair. He was always going to be the guy that was kind of in place until Sting came along or until somebody else came along to challenge the championship and win the championship. I will say overrated as far as Horsemen go, Jeff Jarrett.
Ooh, I agree on that. He broke 1,000 guitars, never drew a dime.
God bless Mike Graham on the Horseman DVD. He never drew a dime. Or the WCW, Broken House Girls never drew a dime of money. It's so true. He did not earn a single house in his own name until he built a company and put himself as the world champion.
And Russo pushed him to the moon in WCW, and the ratings still tanked.
Well, you know what? I will not fault Jeff Jarrett for that, and I will say that only because by the time Vince Russo took over, they were already a year into the decline because Bischoff said himself that August of '98 was the downward turn. And that last Nitro that WCW won when they replayed the Goldberg DDP match for free. Once that show was over, it was a complete one-sided war between WWF and WCW.
And yeah, I actually seem to remember back at the time when Jarrett won the title, he was against it actually because he did not want to be remembered as the lowest drawing WCW champion of all time because the company was already in such bad shape. He was like, I don't want the title.
And the problem was he wasn't because he didn't reign long enough in his reigns to be the worst drawing champion. The worst drawing champion at the end was Papa Pump, Scott Steiner.
You could say that. Craig, anybody else you want to add in terms of most overrated wrestlers?
Well, can I just comment on good old Lex Luger?
Sure. Sexy Lexi. Sexy Lexi, Tony Schiavone called him.
The
What do you bench, Lex? What do you bench?
Like Bobby Heenan called him, the narcissist. And remember Bobby Heenan, the narcissist.
Yeah, so I just want to comment on him. I was watching Starrcade '97 last night, a match against him and, I was bored, what can I say? A match against him and Buff Bagwell, right? The best part of the match was when Luger spit in the face of Buff Bagwell. That was the best part of the match.
Exactly.
Right? But as for another overrated wrestler, I'd have to say Mr. Broken Leg himself, Sid Vicious.
Oh, yeah.
100%. No mic skills. I never saw a decent match with him.
Well, but here's the same thing as so people saw early on. We never really were him high in the first place because even when he was a horseman, it was like, he's a horseman?
Hell.
Okay, if you say so, WCW, we'll go with you. And it never worked.
Yeah, no, that's right. Sid Vicious, I think one of the most memorable matches is probably the match that he broke his leg in, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, he had his run in WWE twice, WCW, but when people think of Psycho Sid Vicious, they think the leg break at Sin. That's the first thing they go to every time.
I think of the half the brain.
Half the brain.
Yeah.
That's true. Well, his promos are legendary.
He insists to this day that was scripted for him to say that, and look, he knew he was going to look like a fool. But I think he's covering his tracks.
Yeah, Kevin Nash
Sid-
sabotaged him.
Sid's entire career can be defined at In Your House 1. Cutting the promo live on pay-per-view with JR, and can we do it again? We're live, buddy. He just was like, oh my God, Sid, really?
He had a few good moments, though, like when he turned on Hogan and did that whole angle with Brutus Beefcake in the barbershop and all the powder got in his face. Yeah, that was scary. That scared me as a kid.
The cocaine stash.
Yes.
But the problem is, during that whole thing, at the very end of it, he out-crapped Hogan, which is something hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, when it came down to getting in the ring, I mean, Sid was entertaining for the wrong reasons, unfortunately. Even though I like the guy, he definitely
Sid was a great guest on Extreme Mayhem. He was one of our favorite guests we ever had on the show. But when it came to getting in that 20x20, it was very difficult to get through.
Yeah, I mean, that Undertaker match, WrestleMania 13, definitely one of the worst WrestleMania matches. Maybe the worst WrestleMania main event of all time, arguably. A few more names. Virtue, anybody else you want to mention that we have not discussed yet?
I'm gonna pair these two guys together, but I'm gonna dismiss one of them. The Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah,
and Sting.
Sting.
Ultimate Warrior. Ultimate
yes.
Warrior. Now remember, we're talking overrated, and this one's my opinion. It doesn't have to be the consensus, but I'm gonna tell you why. The Warrior, we knew. I mean, you can do the whole Jeff reasoning. Early on, you knew the Warrior was gimmick. You know what I mean? You knew he was a body guy. He wasn't, he was going to get pushed because of the look. So we can't say he was overrated. You got what you got out of the Warrior. Sting, however, was supposed to, and in many eyes, he was a really great wrestler. But when I would watch a Sting match, to me, he had his 5 moves of doom. And I can't sit there and name them, but he didn't even, his version of the sharpshooter, a stinger splash. When he turned in the crow, he started doing an inverted DDT. To me, nothing was great. It was the Sting gimmick that was over, and I think that fooled a lot of people for them to think he was this great wrestler. Now, I'm not saying he was a crappy worker by any means, but we're talking overrated. And in my opinion, if he couldn't carry Hogan in that Starrcade match, which was hyped, that was the biggest longest hyped up match, I think, in WCW history at least, then you're going to be overrated in my opinion. I know Hogan, we talked about Hogan, but that was not a very great match. And Sting, if he was so good, why didn't he carry Hogan? So what's your thoughts, Jeff? I think you like Sting, don't you?
I'd like to take a moment right now to say farewell to Virtue's Twitter feed and his email inbox because he's going to die. Yeah.
Give me the reasons.
Warrior, not even overrated, never was rated in the first place. That I agree with. Now, Sting, for everything that went wrong at Starrcade 97 against Hogan, you got to remember, a lot of people still say to this day that Hogan tweaked the creative control, and there was a lot of controversy backstage with him and Nick Patrick and Bischoff. There was a lot of far too much discussion that afternoon, let's put it that way. Go back and watch any match Sting had with Ric Flair. Watch any match Sting had with Rick Rude. Even the one where Rick Rude broke his back and had to retire. Even that match. Sting's matches with everybody that was credible were unbelievable. Now, granted, Sting and Hogan.
We're talking Rick Rude and Ric Flair here, though. I mean, those guys, they can work, though,
Well, but you know what? The problem is Sting had matches with everybody, and I mean everybody in WCW. He worked every single guy on that roster from 88 to 2001, period. And
like John Cena did during his run in WWF.
And the problem is, John Cena, regardless of how we felt about his push, almost always delivered.
Yeah, and Sting DDP. Let's not forget that match in WCW.
We still called Cena overrated, and so I'm just saying, in my opinion, to my degree, I'm calling Sting overrated. And the same asset we call, fact that we called Cena overrated.
Well, but I never called Cena overrated. I called him overhyped.
Okay.
I feel Sting got the amount of attention that was due him in WCW and especially in TNA when he was carrying that freaking company on his back before Angle showed up. And even when Angle was still there, he was still the franchise of TNA, arguably the franchise of TNA. I think Sting, I think Sting's credibility weakens when he turns to the dark side, if you will, and faces Hogan and the NWO and is off for 18 months. And then, of course, his TNA run toward the end was the Joker guy. It was really kind of lack of credibility. And his WWE run was very lackluster, and it wasn't entirely his fault.
Right.
Greg, let me ask you. You're kind of quiet over there because you're letting me and Virtue kind of ramble here. What do you think of Sting? Overrated, underrated? What do you think of the Stinger?
I think Sting's awesome, man. He's not overrated, not in my eyes. I'm sorry, but I've met Sting personally.
As have I.
At WrestleCon. That was fantastic.
I'm just kidding.
No, look, man. Honestly, I can't say that he's overrated in my opinion. I believe he's a fantastic worker, and his character. Oh man. How can you match that? How can you duplicate that character, man? It's phenomenal, really.
Sting was a great performer all around, in the ring, on the mic. He had the look. I mean, Sting was great. I mean, maybe there was a time where he was being paid more than he was worth. I could argue that, especially in TNA. But I would say overall,
that I agree with.
Yeah. Another name I wanted to mention real quick, Kevin Nash. I think the obvious one. A lot of people consider him to be the most overrated. I would say that that's a pretty fair assessment because I think the guy really had very little to offer to the table besides just being tall. And, his promos were okay, not great. His wrestling wasn't too good unless he was in there with like a Shawn Michaels. I think he got over because of the cool factor, like with the NWO. I think that's what he brought to the table. He made the NWO cool. Because
he was cool when he was Big Daddy cool, remember?
He was being the rebel and acting all, anti-authority and all that. So Nash did contribute something, but at the same time, I think he was on top way more than he should have been. And, for those later years in WCW, same thing with Hogan, he wasn't drawing any money yet. He was collecting a big fat paycheck. So, Jeff, anything you want to add to that?
I think the minute Shawn Michaels turned babyface and Kevin Nash had to team up with him and have matches on the same side as him, everybody saw exactly how good Kevin Nash really was. And that's the problem. Shawn was carrying the tag team matches, and Shawn was being the bumper and the worker and the unbelievable, perhaps greatest of all time, or at least 1A that Shawn Michaels was. Whereas Kevin Nash, he had a great match with Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania. He had a great match with Shawn Michaels at Good Friends with Their Enemies. Yeah. He had great matches with Bret Hart a couple times.
Survivor Series.
But no, Survivor Series, King of the Ring, and Royal Rumble. But outside of Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, what really defined Diesel in the WWF? Not a whole lot. And you mentioned the NWO and WCW. Kevin Nash definitely made the Wolfpack, the Too Sweet, the NWO, the coolest thing on the planet. But when it came to in-ring work, Scott Hall carried the NWO.
Craig, anybody else you want to add? I have one more name here I wanted to bring up real quick before we wrap this up. Ryback. Craig, your thoughts on Ryback?
Who? Ryback.
I think that sums it up. Virtue. Anything about Ryback?
He got over a little bit during that run, but it was squash matches. So, I mean, think about it. When you're booked in 3 to 4 months worth of squash matches, doesn't that say right out of the gate that you might not be the best, wrestler? But I don't know. I don't. He didn't make my list, but I really wasn't digging that deep. So I just saw the guy the other day. Didn't he block us?
He blocked NoDQ on Twitter. I think because you were wearing the T-shirt there, and he said, well, I'm not dealing with these NoDQ guys.
I'm very neutral on Ryback. I mean, it's hard. I mean, it's really, you got to really watch footage on all these guys and really dissect.
Yeah, I mean, I think WWE may have dropped the ball with him to a point, with the Hell in the Cell match. I think that they booked themselves into a corner by putting him in there with Punk. They didn't want Punk losing the title, but at the same time, you wanted to protect Ryback. But, I mean, the booking really did protect him. He didn't really stand out when he wasn't being pushed. I think you could tell who the real talented guys are when they're getting over despite not getting pushed. The guys that are pretty much forgotten about, yet they still manage to succeed. Somebody like a Matt Hardy who manages to overcome the bad booking and being pushed down the card, still manages to get a big pop. Ryback really struggled when the company machine wasn't behind him. Now, we're actually out of time here because we got another panel we got to do. So We will wrap this thing up. The most overrated wrestlers in history. Leave a comment on YouTube, NoDQ.com. Let us know what you think. Craig, it was a pleasure to have you on today. Thank you for being our first guest on the NoDQ panel video. Any plugs you have? Anything you want to get out there to the viewing audience?
Look, man, I just want to say thanks heaps to all you guys. Also, big fan. I've been watching you guys for years. I just want to give a shout out to my boy Randall, another wrestler here in Australia who does really well. I trained him. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, at Chris Fuller, so CRIZFULLER is my Twitter handle. Anyone's more than welcome to follow me on Twitter. If you guys ever need anyone for a prediction panel or whatever, I'm more than happy to offer my services. But yeah, thanks heaps, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was definitely a pleasure to have you on. We'd love to have you on for another one. Follow Jeff Meacham at _Jeff Meacham. Virtue, it's NoDQ_Virtue. Is that correct?
Yes.
That is it. All right. Thank you guys so much for checking out the video today. We will see you next time for another edition of the NoDQ panel.